call to order the meeting of the Business Development Commission at 6:32 p.m. Jeannie Mayer will be jumping on here in a couple seconds. She just sent me a note. Bill Swalwell is traveling. Ian, I'm glad you were able to make it. I know you said you weren't sure, so thanks for joining us. Bill's in that similar situation. He's got work things going on and he's traveling back, so he's going to try to join us later. But he did send me a report on ahead of the activity of beautification over the last couple of months. So I will be able to share that in the event that he doesn't make it. So Happy New Year, everyone. Did everybody have a good holiday season?
It's great.
Yeah, is everyone as worn out from it as I am and ready for some no family activity for a little bit? My sanity back for a while. Oh, unfortunately, yes. So being that there's no one here to make a public comment, we will go to a review of the November 10th meeting minutes. So I'll give you guys a couple minutes. Please make note of any corrections, additions, or things we should delete, I suppose. And then in a couple minutes, I'll look for a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion to approve the meeting minutes from November 10th, 2021's BDC meeting.
I'll second.
Any questions or comments? Aaron will be abstaining. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from November 10th, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Present.
Opposed, say nay. Okay. Aaron will abstain. David. Okay, therefore the ayes have it, so the motion passes. Okay, we don't have a huge agenda tonight. I want to kind of start off this first number 4 in the agenda with just kind of a preview of somewhere my mind is at, and I kind of want to launch this. Hopefully these comments will launch us into a broader conversation. So Jay Hedges was gracious enough to meet with me over lunch a couple weeks ago in order to have a conversation of where the village administration, and I would imagine his view of the desire of the board, being that he works with them all the time, at least bi-weekly, what are some of the things that they would like to see us doing for them? Ultimately, our function is to serve as an extension of the village board. We are all volunteers and we're grateful for that service. But it is important that we try to find some semblance of being in step with where the administration is going, where the village board belief is going as well. And during that conversation, I had admitted to Jay, and I feel that I want to admit to you guys, is that I feel like we kind of started to spin our wheels a little bit in the second half of last year. I think we did some really good things, specifically with the origin of the ambassador program, or I know I keep calling it that because it's stuck in my brain. But the place where we communicate with the major business or major stakeholders in town. But in general, I felt like after the streetscape, we lost a little bit of momentum. And so what I'm hoping to do in January 2022 is, I believe that this group has done a lot of really good work for the village of Hampshire. I think that we represent some good value for the people of Hampshire. But I think we represent an even higher value when we're focused and organized and heading in a direction that is in step with the people that are going to be voting for funding and things of that nature. And so over the course of the conversation that I had with Jay, one of the areas that he felt on behalf of the groups that I think he represents is that, maybe having some more conversation about redeveloping what our long-term strategies for this board really are. And I think it's important to at least begin by just recapping some of the things that we've done at the beginning. And I know I do this about once a year, and I think it's important so that we make sure that we're staying in consistency. But when we first started, as I was telling Aaron before the meeting, I think most of us, Dave and Susie and Annie being here from the beginning, we really didn't know what we were doing. I mean, I think that's not embarrassing to admit that. I was new to the notion, new to politics. And so we started off by, implementing the EPA's economic smart growth strategy, where we divided the town into 6 different areas. We then went and assigned those areas to individual people. We dove into it, looking at basically problem areas, old attempts to make improvement, the status of those improvements, and then what goals we might have for that area. Fundamentally, through the process of doing that, we came to the conclusion that Main Street really needed the most work. And so we sort of shed the rest of the areas and then honed our focus on that, thereby developing the facade improvement program, which I think we had some success. We developed a signage program, which we were able to deliver to the board, that I think is still going to be part of the streetscape project. And then we worked very hard at giving advice, specifically towards the streetscapes project, areas we felt would be most beneficial. But now that the streetscape project is sort of a bit in our rearview mirror, and we analyzed taking a second bite at another grant program, whereby we came to the conclusion of it was brought to the conclusion, I think, by the village board that going for that second grant maybe won't make sense because of the upfront cost it would require. It kind of brings us to the present day, right? I mean, that's a short form version of it. And I think what I'd like to talk with the group about tonight, or have you guys talk about in conjunction with Jay and with Aaron, who represents the village board, what are some of the strategies that we think we should be focused on going forward in this group? We have talked about the ambassador program, and I think that's been going forward, and Karen's done a great job at that. We have the brochure. I think it might be back in our lap too. That's another thing we should probably talk about too. But what are some of the other things we think the group should be involved in talking about in these meetings? Because everybody's time is precious, and I know I'm chewing up a lot of it with my long-winded speech. But I really want to kind of just open the floor to all the commissioners, as well as to Jay and Aaron, to kind of get your thoughts on directions that we should start heading and focusing on, seeing as we only really have 24 hours probably over this course of this next year to work together in this meeting. What are some of the things that we should be talking about? So I just want to open the floor up for discussion, and I'd like to hear what we think we should be doing post streetscape, which will happen this year. Albeit maybe a bit reduced from what we originally had thought. So consider the floor open, and anybody who wants to share, just go ahead and jump in. Not all at once.
No, I'll start. So I was taking a look at that website that you had asked us to look at with Algonquin. And I don't know if this is what you're talking about in terms of part of being this, having this be a part of the conversation, but I thought it was a really great site. I thought it had some really cool features to it that maybe we could take a look at as a commission in terms of, focusing on sites and areas that are open or looking to be improved or available. Maybe start from that aspect of it, and is that something that we're looking at doing as well? Was this a site that was just sort of to help us maybe brainstorm or focus, or is this something that we're looking to do sort of a copycat, or take parts of it and incorporate it into our own website? And I think just looking at the site, it was kind of helpful to try and brainstorm some different ideas as to where we might be going. And I feel like it all comes back down to the businesses, right? That's our core, is development of the businesses. And I thought that was a good place to start.
Hey, Jay, would you like to, because obviously you and I had a conversation, would you care to share with the group what some of your thoughts on the village website of Algonquin?
Sure. So first of all, you're absolutely right, Karen. I think what Algonquin has done is really great. They're also, by the way, kind of in phase 3 or 4 of a streetscape project. They did part of it earlier. Now I think they're going in a new phase now. But so Josh and I have already created our own started creating our own economic development page, and it'll have similar things. I think Aaron commented just before the meeting that we probably don't have the budget to do everything they've done yet, or so far. But yes, that, in government, we're proud of plagiarizing because it saves us all money, and it's not like we're, taking competition away from somebody else. And actually, Josh and I both talked to some of the people in Algonquin about that. We've also, by the way, met with Kane County Economic Development and Development people over the last month, so we're trying to make some contacts there. Down the road, there is funding through Kane County and also through CMAP. We're funding comprehensive plans and that sort of thing. But the next round of funding is until October this year. So to your point, Aaron, yes, we would like to do what we can to create a similar page, particularly a list of available sites and buildings. But we've already started that inventory. In fact, I can share after this meeting, I'll share with all of you that probably tomorrow, the link that Josh and I have created so you can see what we have out there. Have you seen it yet? Either one of you?
I'm not.
I think maybe I'll share it with Mike only at this point. But we're starting some of that to build some of that with what we have. Yeah, that I wouldn't want us to limit ourselves to that as the context for really strategy development, but that's kind of the end product. One of the end products is how we would share our information with the stakeholders who are prospects.
Got it. I'll jump in. Couple things from my standpoint. I am the longest tenured member of this group, so I've seen the evolution of where we really did know what we're doing, and I feel like we have a good grasp of where we're at right now. That being said, the one thing, this might dovetail into a bigger conversation, but just looking at neighboring departments across our neighbors and throughout suburbs and whatnot, it seems like we're one of the only ones that call our commission the Business Development Commission instead of Economic Development. And like at first glance, not a big deal. But the more I think about it, one of the most effective ways we've been able to put forth any meaningful action has been through economic development programs, facade development programs, things that do drive business, but also do drive some of those economic engines that we're looking to drive as a group. So when you start looking at it from an EDC perspective, does that open it up for us to look at additional policy, additional recommendations that we can make to the board? Because right now, I think when I think of BDC, I think of only new business and existing business. And I start to really get like very tunnel vision around that. But I do think that there is an opportunity for us to expand that scope if we think of more economic development.
I think that's a fair point, Dave. That was one thing that actually Aaron and I were talking about before the meeting, is economic development versus business development. And we used to have both departments in Hampshire. And then after the election in 2018, we folded Jeff Magnuson, the former president of the village, I think had decided to basically just fold all of that work into the work that we were doing. So I think that's a fair. Does anyone else have I guess, I don't know, does it, anyone have, yeah, which were your thoughts?
I have a question, Dave. How do you define, to you, what is the difference between a business development and an economic development commission?
Yeah, so I think with me personally, business development is how do we attract new businesses to Hampshire? Economic development is not only how do you attract new businesses, but what measures and policies and process can you put in place to generate economic development with new and existing businesses within the village? I don't know if anyone else feels. Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
That's really well said. I would 100% agree.
Did anybody happen to read the email from the Main Street Association today on Main Street predictions?
Mhm.
No.
Oh, it was amazing, and it really got my gears turned. I mean, I took a whole page of notes. So I agree with Dave after reading that looking at more economic development or economic growth would be more beneficial than perhaps just focusing on businesses. Because you can gain a positive economic growth through other entities, not just businesses, if that makes sense.
Ian, you agree with that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, 100%.
Okay.
I think that was one of the big differences I saw with the example site that Mr. Hedges had sent versus what our focus has been is that, and I was making this comment to Ryan before the meeting, that in their digital brochure they have in there, the quarterly newsletter they have, a lot of what they talked about being done was with current and existing businesses, such as variances for signage and building improvements and improvements to existing business land or changing zoning for a PUD for longer term development, things that we haven't, I'm the shortest member on this board and we haven't discussed those kinds of things because I don't think it's been in the purview. It's how do we get new business to come in or where do we see, like, I think there's been really great presentations on the various business districts and what type of business growth would we want to see long-term in those areas. But I think, Dave, to your point, that is a big shift, right? Is it's no longer just about bringing new business. It's how do we elevate or help to grow existing businesses within the community. And that's an interesting shift in focus.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and can I add to that? Because it really goes hand in hand. If a potential business is investigating our community and they see a strong, thriving business and economic development community that already exists and that's supportive to those who are there, I think that's going to make our location that much more appealing. Someone's going to want to be a part of that.
Yeah, I also think from an ambassador program, from surveys, from the chamber, we can glean so much more information if we look at it from the purview of an EDC versus a BDC. Economic impact. I just personally would probably ask a bunch of different questions if I was trying to drive economic development versus business development and who I would talk to.
To kind of carry that point, I think, and Susie, maybe your reading of that article and the notes that you took might be helpful here. What are, assuming, which I think it seems to be a universal agreement, shifting from just business development to economic development, what are some of the other things that would sort of end up getting tied in that maybe we're not looking at now or haven't talked about in the 4 years we've been getting together?
Well, I'll just jump in here if you don't mind. One of the things that blew my mind, and I never thought about it, I mean, you've mentioned it, Ryan, but this totally focused on it, that by the year 2030, there will be 26 million electric cars on the road. And charging stations will take from 20 minutes to 8 hours. So the focus for a lot of communities should be on getting those charging stations at interchanges. We've got the perfect opportunity at the I-90 truck stop, but then developing business around that where people can spend their 20 minutes or their 8 hours would be an area I don't think I've even thought about because I was on the downtown. And then, of course, my mind started going. It said 73% of travelers want shopping, dining, and touring that are authentic experiences of local culture. So if we could not only build restaurants there or other businesses there, but maybe we could even have, my mind was going, maybe we could just have a cute little tram where they charge their car for 4 or 5 hours, but here's a free tram to downtown Hampshire where they can go shopping at the quilt shop or they can go to the restaurant, just my mind was spinning at different things like that. This article was amazing. I'll forward it to all of you. They said that the pandemic brought about the great pivot, and that 76% of business owners have pivoted in the last year, and 73% of that 76% are going to pivot again next year. So business is not going to be the same as usual. The biggest change is going to be integration of technology and of what they call BOPIS, which is buy online, pick up in store. And that's going to extend not only to like the Targets and the Walmarts that do that now and grocery stores, but it's going to be all businesses, and that businesses are moving to what they call showrooming or web rooming, where instead of having inventory on hand, they will showcase what they have in a smaller storefront, and then people will order it and it'll be delivered to them. So no pick up and carry right away because they will not have the inventory. And a lot of things like QR codes, contactless checkout for everything is going to eventually move that way. One of the things they said is that we could help our businesses diversify their revenue streams. Okay, so don't be focused on getting walk-in traffic all the time, but what other ways can we, encourage them to have different revenue streams, like e-commerce, subscription box services, wholesaling. They said one of the things that, because there's such a shortage of chips and things like that, they're coming up with these ideas of, instead of having an entire manufacturing plant for all these different things, having smaller manufacturing plants for just one specialty thing. And then that would have a certain smaller customer base. So they're employing less people, but so much of it's automated. I didn't know this. 10 McDonald's store in Chicago now have artificial intelligence for customer drive-through ordering. It's like their test market. So, the whole world is changing. In Detroit, they even have a tiny home development because there's so many people are needed to work, but the housing, like there's no houses available. So Detroit built a tiny home development where they can live there and they can either rent to own or they can buy it. Let me see what else. 80,000 retail stores are expected to shut down by 2026. So things are really moving into the online business, but that whole idea of charging stations and then developing it around that, can you imagine if we could just be known at the Hampshire truck stop, which is free on and off, to have charging stations? I mean, I think that could be huge for us for bringing in business, but that's just where my mind went. Well, one of the other things they said, that office spaces, because so many people are working from home, that they're turning office spaces into Airbnbs, remodeling them.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
So I just think that the whole charging station idea was just like a light bulb moment for me, that maybe that's something our committee could be looking, that would be beneficial to the community.
And so from an economic development, that's great. Thank you, Susie. I'm really glad you shared that with us. So what my mind starts thinking, I want the other groups thinking. So what do we do with that specific, those kind of pieces of information? Is that something that drives zoning and planning? Does that drive, because at the end of the day, I think one of the things that we've all learned on this commission is that private business is going to do what private business does. Our levers over them, if not zero, if not giving away tax dollars, is very difficult, right? Outside of creating environments for them to have success or easy, planning and zoning. Or so what, I guess my question is, what can we do to sort of capture some of those new trends? Is it in planning and zoning? Is it in, is it part of our marketing material? What are the things that we can do to sort of because I agree, obviously, I've been, reading about that for a considerable amount of time about the transition to that. And I agree with that article in many ways. But but like, what can we as a group do to sort of leverage some of that information?
I think we could do a bunch of research, just centered around what some of these trends are, and be able to say, okay, what are the 3 to 5 major economic development trends that we forecast over the next 5 years? And as a commission, being able to kind of come back and say, is it viable for Hampshire? If we all vote that yes, then that is kind of our diligence and our approach to be able to say, what would it take to put together a proposal to the village board to tackle those 3 to 5 things? And things will come up throughout the year, but it's a way for us to at least point ourselves in a direction that we all have been a part of this for long enough that we know what fits and what doesn't. But if we like truly, like I'm just using as an example the electronic charging. If that's the case, and we do know that's what's trending, it's not only a truck stop; it's throughout the village. It's anywhere where a car is going to be parked for more than 20 minutes. We should be conscious as a village to make sure that, do we electrify it or not? That's I think the essence of thinking of more of like an EDC versus a BDC.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry, Karen.
Oh, no, to kind of piggyback on what was being said, if I may. So I think too, some of it's marketing, right? Like, I'm just kind of thinking out loud. I mean, it's business development versus economic development. It all kind of means the same thing, but, just using a different word sort of gives a different thought focus for people, not just in, our own commission and our own group, but even throughout the community. And I think economic development sort of opens up that, it allows us the opportunity to kind of think a little bit more out of the box instead of sort of narrowing our focus. And it makes me think about like how we had talked about, workforce development and creating jobs. I mean, creating jobs and creating opportunities is economic development, right? And that bleeds into collaborative programs, school systems, or, infrastructure improvement. I think it gives us an opportunity to be able to look at it from a bigger picture and say, we want this community to thrive. We want businesses to come here. We want families to come here. We want employees to live here and work here. And what is that comprehensive look? And it may be bleeding into a comprehensive plan situation. And that's something that we could flesh out. But for me personally, it's exciting as a commission to think that we can look at it a little bit more broadly as opposed to really sort of, like a one track, just new business growth. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think so.
All right, so I'm going to ask my question, and this is for Aaron and for Jay. You both work closely with the village board. Are they thinking along the same lines that we are for the future of Hampshire? Are we going to do all this work and then them say, well, we can't afford charging stations, so we can't go down that route, develop something else? I don't want to see us spend all our time trying to research something and coming up with ideas if the village board is not going to be on the same page.
I can't speak for the whole board, but I could say that the future growth of Hampshire is absolutely everybody is, I would say, aligned on. And what that is defined is, I would guess that the board would be open to suggestions on how does that happen? How do we provide more services? How do we grow our community? How do we become a destination for people? I think the whole board is behind that. I think coming to the board with suggestions, what would be helpful for us to think about is not just like, I think Susie, the first step is, okay, we, like your conversation on the electronic charging stations. And I know, Ryan, you brought that up as a part of streetscape, like idea, right? That's the, let's say maybe the suggestion of one of the things we should do. And then what are suggestions on how we would actually be able to do something like that, right? What are the potential options of consideration? Because I think sometimes if there's not a potential path to make that happen or something that's been identified, then it can be hard for the board to come together and figure out, okay, how do I go make that happen? Just my opinion, Jay, I'd love yours.
Yeah, I agree with what Aaron said. The agenda item that we're kind of talking around right now is developing a strategy, an economic development strategy. First, I want to say, in my mind, I consider the terms to mean the same thing. Business development in the private sector pretty much means sales. But in the public sector, I kind of thought business development was a newer term than economic development personally, but I don't see them as any different. So I would encourage you to think economic development. That's what makes you think more about retention and existing jobs or existing businesses. But to me, that doesn't put us in a box because we're called business development. I mean, if you want to change the name at some point, I just wouldn't get hung up over that particularly, unless you think from a marketing perspective, it makes us look different. Now back to the strategy and to electric charging stations. I do think the board is generally aligned, but I only know that by discussion and by votes. We've never put a strategy in front of them and said, are you okay with that? And that's what Ryan and I spent most of our time at lunch last week. It seems like 2 weeks ago, it was just last week. Was that we have a strategy that you all become the basis for it, and we develop that strategy kind of from the ground up. And I talked to Aaron ahead of time and also Ryan, and I think there may be some discussion about maybe Aaron will kind of lead us through that with his experience in his profession about how to develop goals, strategies, tactics. And I heard you talking about, well, I won't get into that right now. But anyway, so I think the idea of putting a strategy in front of the village board for them to agree with and vote on is where I'd like to be in a few months from now, maybe 3 or 4 months from now. But in terms of focus, I still think we have a lot of work to do downtown. I think I would love to see the facade improvement program double next year. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have the money. We're just starting to look at budget numbers. So it's going to be a challenging year, I'm afraid, for our fiscal budget. But I do think that if this group, with all of your background, your experience, Susie, your experience downtown, I really don't want to lose track of that. In fact, since you mentioned that email, I just remember I haven't seen an email from them in several months. So I must have lost that link. So I need to probably renew my subscription to that newsletter, sign up for it again. So if you would send that forward when you get a chance. I just remember that before I was even on the job in 2019, the first time I met all of you was at that meeting you all had at the bank. And I was so impressed by that and by the people that were there. And I think that momentum is just carried forward, and it really speaks to everything that's happening downtown. I think comes from this committee, really, this commission. So if we can put, I've heard the village board now vote several times on housing developments, on private industrial developments. You guys know a little bit more because we don't have as much publicity surrounding the village board. I'm not quite as open at the village board meetings as I am about some of the development projects. So some of you know a little bit more about that other than Aaron, who we've spoken about privately. But I do think that I do want to stop charging stations is just a little piece of a bigger picture, but this is something that's been kind of on my mind since the infrastructure bill passed, and now it's starting to filter its way down to the states, hopefully soon, and eventually get to us. I would expect that, this is just me, the way I think getting from point A to point B. If we're going to transition from fossil fuels to electricity, we need a strategy to get there as a nation, as a world, really. And what I'm seeing now is a lot of money's been thrown in a pot that's going to be sent out. But I'm not seeing anybody with the map that says, here's where we need to put them. If we put 10 charging stations up, and let's remember that it's at least 30 minutes just for a quick charge. And those quick charge stations are, more than this about, but I think you're gonna spend probably $150,000 for a quick charge station. That'll get you, I don't know how many miles, maybe what, 300 miles in 30 minutes at,
Yeah, I mean, 30 minutes, in our car, 30 minutes will get you about 150 miles,
in a
maybe
quick charge
120.
station. But the slower charge station, you might sit there for 3 hours to get that much, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's, not to like dive too deep into the tech, but to your point, I really think there's still some tech that's on its way. So there's some beta that's going on right now that you can charge in 5 minutes.
Some
So,
of you don't even have to hook up.
yeah,
to the hood.
but I think in a bigger picture is, and I've got a friend of mine who owns several gas stations, and I think he needs to rethink his strategy altogether. Most people will be charging their cars in their houses, right? Everyone will have a gas station in their house theoretically, and so they will become convenience stores more than they will become gas stations. And that model is going to have to shift.
No, it could be that you're right, Susie, in the short run, if nobody else does it, if we were to go out there and do that, that might put us on the map now, so we might get those customers. But Ryan at one point had suggested that we put one downtown here, because if they're gonna come down rather than driving the train down, as you mentioned, just bring your car down here. If you know it's there, it's on the map, you can see it on your app. And you come down, we put it in one of our municipal parking lots. I've already actually done the preliminary concept engineering to figure out where we could get the power, how much it would cost to get the power there, and then how much these stations cost. I've been working with one particular company, and it's about $150,000 per state. Now, you can get a station that'll charge 2 cars at one time. That's another 50,000 or so. So we're talking about $200,000. And Susie, I hate to say this, but the short answer to your question is the village just doesn't have that kind of money right now. There's gonna be all kinds of grant money coming out for that purpose, I think. In fact, I think it's on its way from the infrastructure bill that did pass. So I would like to think that, every lead pipe in America is gonna be in that bill and replaced, but in the meantime, the village is already spending money on the lead pipe surveys. And eventually as of January 1st, now we find a lead pipe, we have to fix it. And there's nothing in it that says the federal government has to give us that money right away, but we do have to fix it because of state law. And similarly, on the charging, I would like to think there'd be some, somebody would figure out where they need to be rather than we put one here or we put 10 here and then the next exit in Marengo, they have 10 more there, and then it's just kind of redundant like gas stations are. But
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on that, and I don't know how it's gonna develop.
Yeah, and I think to the original question of bringing it to the board, making sure, I think Susie brought up, would they be open and receptive to hearing suggestions like that? I think absolutely. What I've come to learn of serving on the board with some for a couple of years and some for this year is that this board is, the members of this board have been very open to the discussions, and I think many would want to have their voices heard as well of ideas that they may have for where they'd like to see the village kind of look towards an economic development. So I think you get more than just I'm receptive to it, but you may get some that say, hey, actually, I'd like to give you a suggestion to consider in your plan or something to think about, right? And so I just ask us to think about that as well, as rather than us just telling them, here's what we think it should happen. Or maybe some that like to just have their voice or the opportunity.
Sure.
Let me just add one thing. Thank you for clarifying that. I think part of this process of developing a strategy would be to go to certain stakeholders and get their input. And one of those, the primary, maybe not a stakeholder, but a key component of that would be get input from the board rather than deliver them a finished plan.
Sure.
Yeah.
So to that point.
I want to dovetail some of this conversation, because this is, these are some of the things that fascinate me more than anything. I think part of the way that we talk about long-term economic strategy, right? And I think that's really where this line item on the agenda is rooted in. I think one of the first things, whether it's the village board or us or whatever, is I think we are entering into a new phase in Hampshire. I think, and this is coming from conversations I've had from Jay, is forever we were chasing, right? We were trying to find a way to make ourselves pretty, right? And I think that was 4 years ago. That's really where we were focused on, because we were sort of an outlier community in a way. We were detached from the metropolis, and we were trying to get what you might call above market growth, in a traditionally sort of sleepy little town. I think one of the things, just to add my input, is I think one of the first things I think we need to sort of decide as a group is, I don't think we're going to be chasing anymore. I think the metropolis is at our doorstep. And I think some of the things that we really need to be discussing fundamentally is, how do we handle the new suitors? Are the things that, the advice, because again, all we are is an advisory board to the village board fundamentally, is, what are some of the things that we, should be, it's my opinion, I'm curious what the rest of the group is. I think we're going to transition into a phase where our main focus is going to be control bad growth more than anything. Because the growth is coming, and there is bad growth, I believe. I think there are sort of mistakes that you can make, in terms of, making other choices about, when I was on the village board, we talked about housing, the type of housing you want, fast housing, do you want, cheap housing, fast housing, diversified housing. But I think that's, the charging stations and all that other stuff, I think are there's still tech that needs to be developed. But I'm kind of curious, as a group is, do we feel like we're sort of in the pursuers or the pursued at this point? And I'll share my opinion. I think if we're not there already, we will very soon be in the pursued. And I think that does change, our thinking, and it changes, what are some of the things that we need to do? Because I think some of the financial things will change as growth comes too. As we get higher population, we will have higher revenues, higher budgets, we'll get higher tap-on fees, we'll get, all sorts of different things, more road, that's fine. So anyway, I think that's the origin point that we really need to start to think about before we get into some of these. I love that article because I think it really sort of sets the way we need to be thinking. But in terms of, what does everyone else think about that? Or does everyone else agree that we're about to change and join the metropolis?
I think so. Where my head automatically always goes is, why Hampshire, right? Do we really have a SWOT analysis from an EDC or BDC perspective to be able to say, like, what does Hampshire have around, compared to neighboring communities? And how can we leverage that insight to put together a plan for the overall future, or recommendations, and make those recommendations incorporating the how. So, so for example, if we found out that getting electrified charging spaces is something that the village has easy access to and can do it much more affordably, and there's a lot of our residents have electrified cars and vehicles, and we forecast that'll grow. That should then drive our approach and the work that we should kind of chase to bring a proposal in front of the village board. I just personally, based on this conversation, I think it's a great conversation, but I would love to be able to kind of take a step back personally and be able to assess. I just can't do it here on the spot, but personally assess of, what areas does economic development, I mean, there are so many different ways that economic development can happen. And frankly, I don't know if I'm educated personally enough to be able to speak intelligently on some of these things. When we talk about just zoning and planning and different zoning types, and I have no idea. So.
I was thinking the same 2 days. I don't think we have the expertise. I mean, Ian is our most effective board member because he has that background knowledge. I don't think the rest of us have that kind of infrastructure understanding to sometimes develop a strategy. It kind of scares me to put that on our plate.
Just in response to both of you, that's kind of why I asked Aaron if he would be willing to kind of guide us through that process. So I think your knowledge, he'll help us pull that from you. If what he and Ryan talked about this before the meeting, I'm sure they'll talk about it again now. But if we can pull that knowledge from all of you, and then pull knowledge from the board in terms of policy up as well, that's how you develop a strategic plan. And what I find now, Ryan, you're absolutely right. I'm getting 2 to 3 phone calls a week now. I used to report to you maybe 1 phone call every couple of months in the beginning. It started picking up about a year ago now. But since I would say August, it's been 2 to 3 phone calls a week. They're either brokers looking on behalf of a client. And frankly, the most important thing is some of our larger landowners are now willing to consider selling if they're not developers, and those who are developers, for example, Van Vlissingen, Chet Clamphere is going to be coming out in the next 2 weeks. And we're going to be talking about 500 acres that straddle Route 20 and Briar Hill Road up north. So that's one of our largest commercial developers. And that's a mixed use commercial and industrial space. So he builds beautiful, big office and industrial spaces. And there are, as we all know, there's already fire hydrants in those cornfields. So some of the infrastructure is already there. We've talked before about the Shireland property, which is one of the final 2 sites now for this big logistics project, which we expect to hear about next week between us and Belvedere. One thing I want to mention to all of you that I don't think I've had a chance to talk to this commission is something I learned during those discussions is that Belvedere has an enterprise zone, and they're also part of the Rockford foreign trade zone, which gives them credits for international goods coming in town, are coming in through that airport. And we've been able, I won't go into all the machinations of it now, but we've been able to extend the IRBDA, the Illinois River Development Authority. I'm missing some, Illinois Valley River Development Authority. Illinois River Valley Development Authority, sorry. They were able to extend to all of Kane County, including us, for a specific project, all the benefits of an enterprise zone. So that was worth, I was able to send them a letter in December, about a week after the deadline, for Project Yukon, that would give them $8.5 million in tax benefits if they locate in Hampshire, which is the same equal playing field that they will get in Belvedere because they actually have an enterprise zone in Belvedere. The same is true for the foreign trade zone. It now includes Hampshire as part of the Rockford foreign trade zone. So we do actually have some economic development benefits now that don't come out of our pocket. They're tax benefits, tax exemptions, state tax exemptions that come with an enterprise zone designation. So the fact that the challenge I'm having is that, for example, the corner of Big Timber, the southeast corner of Big Timber and Route 20 just sold the 14 acres. That's the corner that Oakstead and the new school are in. The sign was only up for about 3 weeks. I had a company call me, a local company that wanted to buy it. They wanted to talk about the zoning. Would this be permitted? I said, yes, we'd really encourage you to do that. We hope you do. They made a full price offer and they got outbid. And I haven't been able to find out who. The broker took their sign down right away, so I can't even remember who the broker was. And it hasn't shown up on the GIS maps yet. So somebody just bought those 14 acres, and I don't know who they are or what they had in mind to do there. Normally, people like that call and want to know what's the zoning. That, by the way, that parcel is not in the village yet, so it needs to be annexed and zoned. So those are the challenges that I have. Is trying. They'll say, what does the village want this? Does the village want that? So I'm trying to read the tea leaves of what the village board has approved in the past. I don't get a lot of calls from home builders. You know, we still have almost 3,000 paper lots in the village, so I don't expect anybody to come in and ask for zoning and to plat a new subdivision anytime soon. I think it'll be those existing subdivisions will continue to build out. But in terms of industrial and commercial development, the logistics strategy that Mike Gazzola shared with us almost 2 years ago has really evolved into our strategy for the truck stop area. And so, even to the point where I'm telling people, look, if you're going to have, Susie, you'll appreciate this. I think if you're going to have 50 trucks a day, stay north of the tollway, stay north of Route 20. Don't come down over Higgins Road. Don't come down towards Widmer. We don't want all that. We don't need all that traffic. In fact, Susie, just the 63 acres north of Pet Ag, that they were talking about an exit onto Widmer or Higgins, and I said, no, you need to bring that down through the park and out onto Gast Road and back up to Route 20, because we don't need all that traffic coming down in that area. It's not part of the village, but it's residential. And then There's actually 45 acres just adjacent to your neighborhood that's owned by Dan Light, the same guy that owns Shire Land and the property behind Elgeloy. And he knows that he needs something there that's kind of transitional. He's not going to put heavy industrial in there. We won't allow that. I'm assuming, because the village board and all, we don't have a strategy that I can point to that says, yes, this is where we're headed. We do have a comprehensive plan, which I use somewhat, but we've all been through that in some detail now. We know that needs to be updated. So the discussions that you have here are really guiding me in what I know that this group thinks will be a good plan, future village. And I get some direction from the village board in private meetings and also in votes primarily. But to have that put together in a strategy that we can all agree on, and then we can share that strategy. When somebody calls right now and they say, I want a building permit, I say, look, here's a link, just click on the link. It's self, you don't need any instructions. That's something new, but it's a great tool. But when it comes to this, zoning and economic development, I have to talk them through it because we don't have the documents anywhere. We don't have the strategy anywhere. So to me, that's a really crucial thing that would save me a lot of time. And frankly, at this point, a brochure in my mind is, we killed that project because it was kind of going off in the wrong direction. But to me, an electronic website and a link that I can send to people is a lot more effective because it can change every day. We don't have to worry about printing it, whether the village board changes or the commission changes or I change, or just a site gets sold. And I don't want people caught. The biggest annoying thing to me in this village is all the for sale signs on property that's not for sale. Because people call me and say, I'm interested in that property. And I say, yeah, well, good luck, because we've had 10 people call and I've called them too, and they're not willing to sell right now. And so I almost want an ordinance that says, if you have property in our town and you have a sign on it, if it's not for sale, take the damn sign off. But now those properties are starting to become for sale now. In fact, I had lunch, I took our utilities people to lunch yesterday at the Rose Garden. And when I was done, they were about to close, and Ann came over and said, hey, Jay, come over and meet a couple brothers. I can't remember their names now. Somebody here will know. They're two farmers that own a bunch of land on the south side of 72. They're brothers, and probably in their 70s. We sat there and talked for half an hour past the time that they closed about their land, how long they've been farming it. These are farmers that have coffee at 9 a.m., not at 5:30. So they've sort of gone past those years. But I learned a lot from them about the history of this land and what it means to them. But they're also starting to think about, my family, my kids don't want to farm. So I'm cut back now. I'm only farming 50 acres and the rest of it somebody else is farming. So I know that land's going to be available soon in the next few years. So I think it is coming our way. We don't know how long this is going to last. If we end up in a recession because of all this inflation that we're seeing right now, this could come to a screeching halt in the next 6 months. But right now we're on the curve, on the upward curve, and we're just trying to take advantage of all the opportunities without becoming urban sprawl. I think the board and you have all given me good guidance on the type of homes that we want in the village and also the type of uses that we want for industrial. So the other piece of it, the one thing that doesn't come naturally is the retail. We're not there yet, and that's just driven by rooftops. So when we talk, one last thing I'll point out about the residential and the industrial when it comes to revenue. Ryan made the point that, yeah, our budgets will grow when we develop. Houses generate enough money to basically pay for themselves, which is great. And I think in the village, we don't have negative earnings when it comes to that because of our impact fees, transition fees and all that. Our homes are a positive value to the village. But just today, I was working with Dave Sterrett, our street superintendent, about 3 new routes over the next 5 years that will add 3 $200,000 trucks and 3 new people that'll have to drive those trucks. And so and that's because of the developing homes. And now we're only building about 5. In fact, last year we generated 45 building permits last year for houses. The year before it was 54. Mm-hmm. So in 21, we actually built, or at least issued permits for 9 less homes than we did the year before. That's going to change this year when Lennar starts building. If you've been through Prairie Ridge, all the infrastructure's in there now for K&L, and M will come soon, another 132 townhouses. But the real revenue comes when Stanley Manufacturing's new spec building goes on the tax rolls. That's a $4 million value according to the to the assessor. I think Robert may still be talking to the assessor about that. But that's going to generate $36,000 just for the TIF district. So those are things that we're watching right now. And the downtown development is really critical. So my point is, houses generate people, bodies, counts that will bring retail. That's important that we grow our population for that purpose. We don't have like Genoa where 72 goes through right downtown. So you have 15,000 cars a day going through your downtown. Instead, we have 1,100 cars coming through our downtown. But the industrial side of things is a net positive for the village, big time net positive. So whether it's a warehouse or it's an industrial facility, it's the building that generates revenue for us, not the equipment in it. So 1.5 million square foot logistic facility, I haven't done the math yet, but it would generate a lot of revenue for the village in terms of property tax and for the schools and everything else. So can't remember where I started, so I'm going to end it right there.
You know what? I mean, Jay, just by your recap there, this might sound totally off base, but obviously your finger is more than on the pulse of what needs to be done. I don't want to say problems, but there are things that impact economic development that if we could help clean up, that would allow us to be in a better position, right? For sale signs like ordinances and having the group discuss that and have proposals to the board. Being able to handle, pointing people to a website. That's, these are things where I think you see the problems today, but maybe this board can take some of those and out of developing solutions, we can use it as a foundation to grow from. One thing I just want to add on the website really quickly, because this might have actually happened before everyone here. We do own the URL or website address, choosehampshire.com. Right now it does redirect it to the business development page. So the website is great. I would always recommend that we build off of our current platform if we want to do anything from an SEO standpoint. Creating a separate website, I think it takes a lot of time and energy to keep up to date, and you're never going to get the same traffic that you do to your main homepage today. So just best practices from my experience, trying to incorporate that into our current website, I think is important. But that's a side note. I think if we were able to kind of line list the things that you feel the village could run more efficiently, it to me sounds like, gosh, if we could help develop a new, better enhanced website for business within our current, if we could help identify what kind of rules or ordinances need to be in place to allow for sale signs to be up in the management of that. If there are those things, that might help us in our endeavor to increase economic development.
Yeah, so two things. Susie, I'm right by your side on, and I think Jay and Ryan from our history together can admit to this. I ask a lot of questions in board meetings because I don't know a lot of things and I try to learn, and I don't question the question, I question to seek understanding. So in like the discussions we've had around creating that strategic plan, it's more about me helping with just the process and the project management of it, not actually saying here's things we should do and consider, because I'm not a rural or village planner at all. And I think actually Josh may, with his education, be somebody we want to make sure we have in those discussions as well. So please don't feel like you're the one. I'm right there with you on that. Dave, I also don't want us to negate, and I believe it was you that we went through multiple presentations of a plan that was already kind of looking at identified areas and types of businesses to go into geographic areas and what would that long-term growth look like? And what are things I think we have a solid foundation of that type of future planning that I believe you already put together. And we're not
Yeah.
really starting from scratch, right? I'd hate for us to lose all of that work that's already been done.
Oh, no, I believe the next steps of that was to give it to zoning and planning
Right.
to incorporate into their planning once we have money to update the comprehensive plan. That's what I understood.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is I think this process where we actually step back a little bit and take a couple months to put together a strategy. I'm gonna leave it to Aaron to give us a timeline at some point. But that will be more effective when we go to the planning and zoning commission and say, hey, we want to work on a comprehensive plan. Here are the things, the specifics that you led us through, Dave, and summarized. But then this is how it all fits into this bigger strategy. So yes, planning and zoning is important. Pre-zoning is not all that important. It's mostly when a project comes up, they come in and they want to rezone then, but we want to know ahead of time what the probabilities are that the board would support something like that. Is this part of our growth strategy? Do you all agree? This is not a question for now. It's a rhetorical question that we'll get to. Is do you all agree that we should really focus on logistics and a lot of truck traffic and a lot of that traffic they don't want on 47 because that's a commercial area right now, retail area. We want to say, yeah, bring all your trucks here, but just keep them north of the tollway. Is that, I've said that to all of you. I've got a lot of heads nodding yes. I've said that to the village board. I think that's accepted. So I'm acting on that, but it's not part of a strategy that's been recommended and endorsed. And that's just one piece. You know, we talked about commercial along 72. Yes, the village board has agreed. In fact, just recently we approved a project at Ronke and 72, a developer, and they are putting 16 acres of commercial on 72 on the frontage. In fact, now he's talking about maybe putting commercial in the back also, as opposed to apartment. So we all talked about that. Let's not let all this future retail potential, commercial potential turn into housing developments like Tuscany Woods did. So I think we're all thinking in the right direction. It'd be really great if we could pull it together in an economic development strategy. And then that would evolve along with the work Dave's already done into the comprehensive plan. That's my big picture.
Yeah. I think from listening to everything, I think our strategy is pretty, I mean, at least the next path forward is, I think, relatively laid out, and I think of where we need to go. I think fundamentally seeing ourselves as a tool, as an extension of the work that's being done by the village board and by the administrator. What we're hearing from them is they're having conversations with prospective businesses, and he's having to sort of improv, based on information that he's drawn from individual conversations. So I think what he's asking of us, and I think it's certainly something within our capability, is that I think our next major goal is to come up with not a mission statement, but an economic strategy that is, broad and has enough detail so that when people do come to him, it's a strategy that's been voted on by the village board, that is endorsed by this board, that he can feel confident is fulfilling the will of the people. And I think from a strategy perspective, not to use that word twice, but we have Aaron, who has professional experience in the process of developing something like that. Knowing, again, to Aaron's point and to Susie's point, is knowing that all public officials are relatively ill qualified to do what they do. That's my personal experience.
Nicer.
No, someone said, like, I don't know, I feel like sell robots for a living. I used to be here too. So I think let's go for it. And what I think, unless I'm curious if you want to object, this is one of those things. If not now, forever hold your peace. But I think what we go forward with now, and if Aaron, if you're willing to do sort of a layout of, I know Dave mentioned a SWOT. I'm sure that's I've heard that term before or whatever. But I think I think it's going to be 1 to 2 months. I think it's probably going to take us 3 or 4, maybe 5. Depends on how long it goes. But let's have as our next goal to have a series of definable principles as to these are the goals in terms of economic development for Hampshire for the next 5-10 years, so that we can arm the people that are interacting with these businesses with the specific will of this board and the village board. And I think I'll have some private conversations with Aaron after this meeting. And I think we should, as our goal going forward, is to start to specifically lay out those terms of where we want to see the village go in terms of economic development, not business development. And then hopefully we can deliver something to you that will be, specific, and heck, it'd be nice to be something we can publish on the website. We can point people to and say, this is what Hampshire is looking for economic development. So I think to kind of bring this conversation to a close and move on, unless anybody has any objections to that, I think that should be our next goal. Do we agree? Something that we can get in, and I think we'll have, and my commitment to you is that we will have something before the next meeting that will be specific in terms of process from a broad overview, and then we will get together and we'll walk through that together, fill that opening, that sort of 2x4 structure with siding and roofs and windows and all the other things that I think Jay needs in order to do his job, and Josh, as well as the village board. So
I just want to say, we're asking Aaron to kind of lead this process, but I've already offered him all of you to know that Josh and I will staff this all the way through. If there's information you need, details you need, data you need, we'll staff it all the way through.
And I think one of the other things, just to end on this point, is I think one of the things that I heard come out of this, and something we need to think of as a separate item, is whether or not really the true function of this board is really a research board, fundamentally, and providing very detailed information to a set of trustees who have a lot of other things that they need to worry about. And we can sort of focus on economic development and provide to them, like what Susie provided at the beginning of this meeting, very specific information that they can sort of help enhance their decision-making processes. So I think that's a secondary thing that we should think. So, does anyone else have anything else to add to that topic? Okay, and is I see +1 now.
I'm assuming that's Jeannie. Are you there, Jeannie?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Sorry, Jeannie, I wanted to bring you in. I know you came in the middle of the discussion, but we also thank you for joining us this evening, Jeannie. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you for letting me listen in.
Of course, and feel free to chime in. So I've always considered you to be an active member of this board. So thank you for joining us. Okay. Just real quick here, is there any update to share on, well, I guess I still have Streetscape 2.0, don't call me out on it.
I think I'd call it 1A at this point.
1A, yeah.
Yes, there is absolutely an update, and there'll be a further update either tomorrow or Monday. I realized by listening to you, Ryan, I don't have to yell as loud as I have been. Like my voice is going already. Streetscape. So right now, EEI is doing a engineering cost estimate, which is their estimate of what they believe that there's Susie, you popped up, you must have left. So just so you know, Jeannie, you're on camera now, you were not before.
We all saw her.
Okay, we couldn't see her here, we can only see 4, so we saw E, and I just wanted to make sure. Anyway, Streetscape, so there's going to be a significant scope change because of all the material costs and supply chain issues. As you all remember, our quote, I think our lowest bid was almost 1.5 million for $1,030,000. So I just talked to Kurt today. He's trying to get the actual construction piece down to about $850,000, which will then allow us all the other engineering and components that need to go with it. And it's a challenge for him already, and he hasn't added the numbers up yet. So I'll probably be bringing to the village board, maybe not next week, but within the next, we hope to bid it again by the end of the month. But just listening to Kurt today on some of the things that we've done, I'll give you one example. This is, in my mind, not a material change, and it will save, not a small immaterial, in other words, not a significant change, but it will save us some money. The canopy lighting that we all like so much that we think will really create that festival feel. The original plan, which was done by PRI as a subcontractor, called for 4 light poles on each side of State Street in the festival block. EEI thinks that we can remove 1 pole on each side, get the same number of lights strung across the street, but just from 6 poles. That'll save us about $10,000 per pole, including the pavers that go around the base of the pole, the electrics, and everything else. And that's the level of detail we're having to get down to try and cut the cost. I made a call today just for the purposes of bidding. We have a lot of bollards. Some of you might remember when Daryl from PRI was saying these bollards create the perception or the feel of safety. And I never really questioned him on that. But it came up today with EEI, and he said those bollards are very expensive because they're decorative and they really provide no protection. They're just decorative and they cost $1,200 a piece. For $800 a piece, we can get real steel bollards that will actually stop a car and give you real safety at those bump outs.
Bump outs.
And so he said I was proposing to do that as an alternate so we can make a decision. I said, don't bother, just put the steel ones in. I'm sure that our board from the beginning said, safety and infrastructure is more important than the surface look. So we made some decisions like that. There's a storm sewer on Ren that needs repair. And there was about $100,000 worth of that work in the streetscape project. Well, now, today when we looked at all the infrastructure village wide and went through all that with both streets and water and sewer, we have a stormwater issue at Park and Ren that is a problem, similar to Highland Avenue that we were able to fix a year ago. And so that we took that out of streetscape and now we're going to move that portion of it into the Park and Ren infrastructure project, which is also not funded, but we had to do that to cut streetscape back. What I'm trying not to do so far is to reduce the area of the street, but get us similar impact without doing some of the things that in order to get it down to the budget. For example, we had $80,000 to rewire the lights downtown even before streetscape came along. It was still in our capital budget because that was a 3-year capital budget. But after I talked to Kurt today, he said, I think you should leave that in there because that's $80,000 that we can contribute toward the wiring. It may not be because streetscape may come in over budget. So that's where we are. I think at this point, we're going to get all the features still in there. I think I mentioned once before that some of the real brick pavers may have to be replaced by some stamped pavers. So there's going to be a combination of real pavers, stamped pavers, and painted pavers in this next document that we're going to see, that I'll see probably tomorrow or Monday. But I don't even know what that number is going to add up to. And if it adds up to 1.2 million in engineer's estimate, there's no point in even bidding it. At that point, we need to go back and really rescope it entirely and cut way back. So, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of private developments going forward. I've seen some that have completely stopped. And I've seen a lot of, the residential stuff is just booming. People are paying whatever it takes to buy a house. It doesn't seem to matter right now. But we don't have that kind of money. The village doesn't. So if something went up 20%, we don't have the increased budget. So the answer to your question is we'll know a lot more in a week, and then we'll know a whole lot more by the end of January.
Okay. But under ideal conditions, we will be trying to bid this by end of month unless we have to do a radical
Yes, I would say that we will be bidding by end of month. It's a question of what the scope is.
Got it.
The only other thing I'm going to mention, because this is something that comes up at the board level, Mike gets really frustrated with some of the contracts that don't end on time. The intersection of State and 72, there was a lot of misunderstanding about when that was supposed to be finished. And I don't have to remind you all that, after this new board came into office, the first thing we did was announce streetscape, and about a week later, we took it all back. So that's something that Mike's very sensitive about, rightfully so. But one of the things that we learned in bidding that is we bid it at the wrong time of year, and then we constricted them to a 3-month time period because we didn't want to disrupt our businesses for any more than that. I was really carrying that voice very firmly today with Kurt, and he said, we can do that, Jay, but if you do that, if you restrict them to less than 16 weeks, in his mind, in fact, he started 18 to 20 weeks, and I finally got him back to 16 weeks, the price is going to be higher. We had talked at one time about giving them a window of 6 months, but then telling them they have to do the construction in 3 months of that. So in other words, start whenever you want, when it's convenient for you, but once you start, you have to finish in 3 months. Kurt feels that if we do that, he's seeing that the jobs that are coming in at budget and lower are the ones where the contractor has more time and more flexibility, which means trust, which is something we don't really have with some of these bigger contractors. Now, by the way, by the end of this month, actually, the bids are already on the street for the water connection. And we should have those bids, I think they open next Wednesday. So we're gonna see where that comes in. The engineer's estimate for that was actually lower than budget. Our budget was 1.8 million, the engineer's estimate is 1.43. So if that comes in even close to that, and I will tell you that EEI is looking at material costs from vendors, they're calling other contractors, they're doing other bids in other communities, so they have a really good grasp on material costs. So I think we're gonna know a lot more, and I think what we're gonna see, provided that the building board agrees, is that we may have to give the contractor as many as 4 months and maybe an 8-month window. So say you can break ground as early as April 1st, it has to be done by November 1st, but once you start construction, you have 16 weeks to finish. So Jeannie, that's something I'd be interested, the other big change, I want to mention one more thing. One of the cost savings ways, up until now, we said we won't disturb any of the sidewalks because none of them are cracked, none of them needed to be replaced. And Kurt did some really creative thinking about this, and he said, I've been talking to contractors and they're all concerned about cutting cutting the curb cuts, putting in the new curbs in some cases, and also to put in the light poles and some of the minimal landscaping. And so he suggested, and I told him to put it in the bid, is that they're gonna now basically take half of that sidewalk out where the seam comes right down the middle. So they'll take four feet of sidewalk and the curb out along with the street. And it's cheaper to do that. That gives everybody a lot more room for all the wiring and the infrastructure, and a lot less labor. So he thinks that'll be less expensive, but that will be more, I guess it would have to be more disruptive because now there'll only be 4 feet of sidewalk in front of the building instead of 8. On the other hand, I don't expect that the Copper Barrel is going to want to do outdoor seating this summer on State Street, especially when they now have their nice patio in the back. So Jeannie and I talked just, I think it was yesterday, about how important it is. I'm working on a list of every single business downtown, a cell phone number and an email address, so I can in 2 minutes contact all of them. And we'll have them in this room and take for a walk. Anybody that'll join us, we won't make the mistake we made last year. I'm sorry, that turned into a speech.
That's fine. Streetscape's important. I guess I would just like to lend my opinion is obviously we're concerned with impacting businesses financially. We want to be concerned about that, but at the end of the day, I will be in favor of doing the project properly for at least a month. If it comes down to Facebook worry, I don't think people are moving because of what we do. So I just, it's my opinion is that, over the course of my life doing business projects that people's memories tend to be quite short, and our focus should really be on applying their capital as efficiently as possible. And if that means they get a little crappy, then I think, put my name on it, I'm fine with it. I know you can't anymore, but that's just my opinion is I would hate to increase costs in order to save impressions on Facebook. I think that, and I'm not saying that's what anybody else is saying, but we want to be considerate of our businesses, but we have a mission in front of us that we okay, thank you for that. Does anyone have any comments on Streetscape?
Thank you for the update.
Yeah, it was probably a little more than you needed, but I guess it was a dry run for the board meeting next week.
Yeah, as your practice run. No, I appreciate, and I think the entire board appreciates the level of creativity that you're applying. You and Josh and the rest of the village board. Obviously, this is very close, near and dear to our heart. We've worked very hard on this for a very long time, and your effort to try to preserve the original intent is not lost on us. It's very important. So thank you. Okay. Susie, would you like to kind of just share the Main Street program? We can maybe take a few minutes. I know Jay and I had also talked about Main Street during our meeting, and I thought maybe you could kind of share what you shared, maybe an email about where we are in the Main Street sort of membership and things like that.
Okay, so when we first joined Main Street, we were a committee of members that didn't know what we were doing. And I think we really found in Main Street a guideline and a tremendous wealth of information. Remember, we took all those classes. Each of us took turns taking all those classes in areas of expertise, and we learned a lot. I'll be honest with you, Streetscape kind of took over and Main Street got pushed aside. But I also realize now with more knowledge and experience that to have a really functional Main Street program, you need to have a Main Street coordinator. Somebody that, even if it's a part-time position, I think from what I understand and what I see being done in most communities, the Main Street organizer is actually an employee of the village and they coordinate it all. And we're not employees and we're all working other jobs. And so we don't have the time or the focus to do that. So I was getting very discouraged about being a part of Main Street, and our membership dues come up in February that we have to make the decision of whether or not going to re-up. I think it's like $200 or $300 a year. And then I get this email today and I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, this is a wealth of information. One of the things I forgot to mention, it did say that the businesses of the future, retail businesses, are going to continue to be dining and entertainment, because that is never going to go away, although that saw the most decrease in employees. So they're really struggling to get wait staff. So that's why a lot of restaurants are going to counter service. So you order at the counter and then take it back to your seat and sit down. So that's some of the things in the future. But these are the retail establishments that they said that were in the future. Health and fitness stores, home improvement stores, and furnishings and decor, because that's what people seem to gravitate towards during the pandemic. People are not wearing fancy clothes anymore because they're working from home. So in combination with the health and fitness stores would be clothing. And they talked a lot about, in that thing about sharing, you know, like two businesses sharing a retail space. So you could have maybe as part of the exercise equipment, and somebody's there exercising and have a little store right next door with exercise equipment or, you know, clothing and attire. So it made me realize that mom and pop businesses are changing, and that's the future. And who knows, they're just predictions, they could all be wrong. So anyway, after reading that email, I'm thinking, well, this still is a valuable resource for us. I'll be honest, I dropped the ball. Like Aaron, I was working on my master's, still am. Congratulations, Aaron, by the way, you graduate. I'm jealous. I think that's wonderful. But I think this is something that as a committee we need to discuss, as we did before when we decided to go with Main Street. I think we need to discuss if we stay with it or not. There is now an Illinois Main Street. It was defunct when we first started, and now it's gathering steam again. They had their first meeting in Jacksonville. So it's there. Do we be a part of it? Do we not be a part of it? I think our committee needs to discuss it.
Well, I'd just like to add one thing. I want to kind of dovetail the TIF district into Main Street and tell you why it's so important that we develop Main Street, aside from just having nice places to shop and all. Over the last, I think roughly 15 years since the TIF was created, before the 08 recession, it was created in 05. The assessed valuation downtown has dropped like a rock until 2012, and now it's grown steadily. The assessed valuation of the whole village and downtown is starting to grow. And if you look at the $450,000 that Josh shared with all of you and the village board in December, that the facade improvement program alone, that all goes right into assessed valuation. So Christina's salon, sorry, Christina, but your taxes are higher, and every penny of that increment is going to our TIF district. And Karen, the same thing for your family's building, that's in the TIF district. Unfortunately, because the building that you bought and then renovated was not blighted at the time, that was carved out of the TIF district. So all the improvements you put there, we get our 6%, but we don't get 100% of those property taxes. So it's really, so right now the village has had to loan or supplement. So the TIF district issued bonds and then gave grants, a couple of grants to businesses. And some of those grants, they were grants, so it was one way, but it was, and we issued TIF bonds in order to finance those grants. And then the bonds were supposed to be paid back by the incremental property tax. And that just hasn't happened. So the village has had to pay those bonds, and so the TIF district now owes the village $300,000. Our bond payments this year are about $67,000 for the TIF, and our revenue from the property taxes, the increment, is around $50,000. We've been supplementing, and before it was more than that. It was $30,000 a year, 1 year, and then $25,000, and 20 it's down to 15, but that has accumulated to $300,000. So you can hear how important that one building, a $4 million building, goes on the tax rolls. That's $36,000 every year and that assessed value will go up a little bit too. So that will actually close the gap. That one building will close the gap on our bond payments now and put us in the positive. But our bond payments are ballooned because it was expected that in 3 more years, the bond payments go to $200,000 a year. And the TIF right now is generating $67,000 a year in taxes. So if we put money anywhere in the village, I'd like to see it here downtown and specifically on those properties that are in the TIF. So Josh is right now working on a tool that we're going to use to, there's about almost 300 properties in the TIF. Some of them are residential and some of them are commercial, and a combination of both. But we've never really managed it very well. We've never monitored it very well. We haven't had a meeting in over 5 years. But now that our financials are all caught up, we do plan to have a TIF meeting in February. And there will actually be a new member will have to be appointed on behalf of the village proper and also on behalf of the, so there's a representative from every taxing district that's on there, and that taxing district can send whoever they want to the meeting. There's not a single person appointed. But then the village has a person that can be appointed, either staff or elected, and then the TIF itself has one that represents them. So we're working on cleaning up all the old documents and all the minutes and everything, so we can have a meeting sometime in February. That is so important that we continue to develop the properties in the TIF district so we can get the village out of this hole and at the same time bring services and retail that people want. So downtown with streetscape and TIF and the downtown, Main Street program, to me, those all really have to be coordinated together. And Susie, I'm glad you're re-inspired because that's something I told Ryan, as much as there are other places to focus, we really need to stay focused downtown. There's a lot of momentum there, but we have to keep it going.
So do we believe the appetite of the board for $300 for a new member? I mean,
I wouldn't even ask the board, to be honest. I'll just tell you, go ahead. I'll just let the board know. It's not it's $300. I didn't go to the board for approval on that last year either.
Okay.
Jay's got authorization to spend up to X dollar amount.
Yeah,
300 to 100.
At this point, we would spend $5,000 like we did last year, 20 with A5, because we don't have that kind of money, but $300, sure.
Okay. Sound good, Suze? What do we need to do then?
So here's an idea that just popped into my head. And I'm shooting myself in the foot here. But we could pay $300, but I'll be honest with you, I have been so sidetracked with everything else going on in my life, I haven't followed Main Street and kept up with it like I had in the beginning. Would it be beneficial to have a subcommittee, maybe just 2 of us, me and maybe some other person, that could be like Main Street coordinators to keep up to date with what's going on and what Main Street is recommending, just like this one particular email just gives us a wealth of information and knowledge. I guess I don't want to do it all myself, but I think if we had a little subcommittee or 2 of us within this group, or maybe there's somebody outside of the group that you want to put on that Main Street committee. Jay, you might know somebody that might be more interested in moving that forward. I hate to see us spend, I know it's only $300, but I hate to see us spend $300 if we're not going to use what's there and what's available.
Hey, my name is Mitch Moore. I do have some thoughts on that. It just popped into my head. I've been thinking this whole time, Jeannie, you get together with your downtown people, and I don't know if it's a subcommittee or not, but I've bumped into you a couple times over at Copper Barrel once, I think. I'm not going to name any names, but there's several people downtown that I think would be really good at that. So what might work is if Susie could maybe be the chairperson of the Main Street Committee, and then with Jeannie's help, we could identify 2 or 3 or 4 other people downtown. I have 3 in my mind right now, although I think Christina is now on the beautification committee, right? Christina Salon. Yeah, she's one of them. But there are others. So I think we could come up with 2 or 3 more people if you all thought that was a good idea.
I've always thought it was a good idea, so I'm on board for sure.
We're a little short on staff. I would say that Josh and I will do our best to staff it right now, because I don't think we are in a position to even hire a part-time person for that, although our budget's going to start coming together in the next couple of months.
It's a great idea to get other people from the community involved and have that buy-in for sure and advocate.
Also, a recommendation could be,
Finding male participants, because everybody in our chambers now becoming all these really sharp professional women.
one other place we could pull from is possibly people from the beautification committee, which is probably one and the same, right? Many of those are current chamber members.
Does that make sense? I don't see a problem with that. Would it make sense for people to be on both, or maybe make one committee but be both? Maybe the Main Street Committee becomes the beautification committee as one function.
What do you think about that, Suze?
I don't know. I don't know enough about what, I guess I think beautification committee is facade and exterior and literally the word facade, just the cover up. I think Main Street goes deeper into what projects that the community can provide for the people that live here, what businesses can do to draw more walk-in business or more traffic, foot traffic, how to develop the parks and the recreation. I mean, Main Street is not just retail stores, it's community wide. So I don't see that as part of beautification.
Susie, maybe the inverse of that.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
beautification committee becomes the Main Street committee.
But what I was going to say is the facade improvement program is really a subset of the Main Street Committee. One task that the Main Street Committee could do. Gina, you're on the beautification committee, aren't you? Or were?
Yeah, I am.
I bet you've never been to a meeting. It's pretty much just the facade program, right?
We've, you know, a lot of the stuff that we meet for now is facade. We originally did a lot of the work for the signs and all that kind of stuff. We kind of looked at a bunch of things, what we could do small, kind of spun our wheels because we really, you know, when you're on beautification, it's like, what can we spend? And then that kind of circles through to the village and what will they let us do and that sort of thing. So it was kind of a lot of wheel spinning there, but facade was one thing that we felt we really could dig in and do. So that's mainly what we've been doing.
Is it possible to have two committees? But the only thing I'll say is, because Bill runs beautification, I think, brilliantly. Right? It's very important that does not get disrupted at all, in my opinion. However, Jeannie, I mean, it really does function for almost, what, Jeannie, 2 months, 3 months? I mean, it's really, we get budget money, right, at the turnover. Then, you know, we've had people, it's not like it goes all year as working all the time. I think.
No, it's really the beginning of the year and
the budget year.
the budget season, yeah.
So it just might end up being a light time of year for the Main Street Committee, but I think a member of the beautification committee could very easily be a member if they're interested. You know, you don't de facto make them a member, but we could seek some of the members from beautification to join that. And then just Susie, then during that, you know, budget time or right when the budget rolls over and we get heavy on facade, we just ease up on any work that Main Street might be doing.
Is this when a facilitator would come in and say, those are great ideas that would fit into an overall economic development strategy?
No,
No?
no, because I think there's different purposes, and I think maybe you had mentioned it or Susie had mentioned it. The idea of having these be separated motions allows for more people to have participation in the different activities, which then gets the community a larger buy-in because more people feel a sense of ownership or belonging to what's happening. If you bring it all together and try to have it as one thing, you still have that core group and it's may not have as much of that spiderweb effect of trying to bring more people and more insights, diverse opinions, things like that into it. So
I was a little concerned we might not have enough people out there willing, but Jeannie, you think we have people out there that we can tap for something like this, a new group?
You know, we can always just ask around and see what we can find, you know?
I heard another idea about somebody that like is part of parks, you know, that and recreation, that somebody or the library that would be interested in fostering the development of the community as a whole, not just businesses. I think it, like you were saying, it could be several buy-in from several parts of the community.
And when we originally met, I mean, at the very beginning, when Susie had brought this, idea, one of the original parts of the strategy was to the point Aaron was making was, we wanted to sort of fold in, park people, maybe township people, fire district or whatever, sort of make it more of a broader based sort of approach. And the challenge, I mean, I think we got hit with COVID. That was really, that stymied that whole progress, but that would be my only point. But the original imagination of the board was to sort of fold other people in that weren't specifically, meeting in this room. But to the point is, it does, and I think that was one of the ideas, was to broaden the investment into this development strategy.
I think it's something mentioned in the strategy that there are committees that focus on different areas or groups that focus on different, but I wouldn't have that group dependent on like a part of that strategy where they have to do what's in the strategy, but rather, to your point, fold in more of the community into those motions.
Well, I like to come up with a research committee. Even the Main Street could be research on what we can do and bring it back to this committee and also the board on directions that we could take. Because as a Main Street committee, we can't come up with an idea and enact it and get it done. You have to go through the chain of command.
Well, ultimately, you have to go where the money is, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And right now, the money's all coming from the village, and that's part of our challenge.
Yeah, sure. Susie, what do you think about next meeting, sort of maybe kind of talking, revisiting some of those earlier thoughts that you had, you had a pretty, I thought, in-depth presentation. It was the 4 things, remember, we went through.
Right.
You think it bears sort of having that conversation again to bring the rest of it?
I'm going to be in Disney World on our next meeting.
We'll move it to Florida then.
I think we should go down there.
So
I might be in Florida
in
next
Orlando.
Should have got
Yeah,
cheap. Okay, I think at the very least, what we should agree on as a group is that we'll pay the $300. Right, but I think as a more important piece is what Susie mentioned, is I think we should reimagine, or revisit that and maybe reimagine it. But I certainly, the vision in pre-COVID for sure, was that we would sort of have a multi-group involvement so that we could sort of make this a mission that is part of the town and not just from the village. Okay, I think that's good. And then Susie, enjoy Disney World, but we'll talk offline, and then maybe the next meeting you're back, we'll bring that up again. So I'll put that in there.
Okay.
Good discussion, really good discussion, thanks.
Okay, Aaron had an item he wanted to discuss regarding the registration fee increase for video gaming terminal. I think, he was thinking we wanted to go up 10x, and I couldn't agree with him. So,
No.
Oh, sorry.
For the record,
Go
no.
ahead, I'm just.
So this was discussed in the village board meeting last week. I don't have any of this memorized. I have the village packet in front of me, so if you want to
I can
read more
actually show my screen if
details.
you want to see some numbers.
That's okay. I'm just gonna talk through it because it's just for discussion. In the village packet, you can read more of the background. Josh did a great job of doing a ton of research on this topic. Basically, to summarize, the state recently passed House Bill 3136, which was referencing video gaming regulations. And one of the regulations that changed, or one of the changes that presented, was the change in non-home rule municipalities' registration fee for the gaming machines. So right now in the village of Hampshire, before this passed, we could charge $25 a year as a registration fee for every gaming machine throughout the town. So if you have 6 gaming machines.
You know how many you have, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if you had 6 gaming machines, then you would owe $25 for each one of those, even though you're one business. And that's what we were limited to. The new bill allows the non-home rule municipality to increase that up to $250 per terminal. There are currently 68 terminals or video gaming machines in the village limits of Hampshire. So right now, we generate an annual revenue on just the registration fee of $1,700. That's $25 a machine. If we were to increase it to the max of 250, that would generate incremental revenue of a little over $15,000, $15,300. So the village board had a discussion about that. Would we want to increase it? Would we not want to increase it? What do we increase it to? Because it doesn't have to go to 250. You could say, the way Josh laid it out in this packet is, here's an example. If we kept it at 25, if we went to 50, 150, 250, what would it look like? The cost is incurred by the business that has the video gaming machine. We also do generate 5% revenue from each terminal. Net income, sorry, 5% of net income from each terminal. This year it's budgeted, that amount is budgeted to be about $106,000 in the village. So it's a pretty decent amount of revenue on that side. He also looked at other municipalities. South Elgin and Sleepy Hollow are intending to vote on the increase of the local fee to 250. Pingree, Burlington, Montgomery, Sugar Grove are also considering increases. And then for home rule communities, they can set their own prices. Everyone that was listed here is at 250 or above, except for Woodstock is at 100. Elgin is at 25, and I think some of the comments by the board at that time was, well, yeah, but they also have the boat, so they have a lot more gaming. And DeKalb, surprisingly, is only at $25. But everybody else is either 250, 300, 500, somewhere around there. So what I told the board that I would do is bring this topic to the BDC for discussion on what is the BDC's stance on increasing the per year registration fee. One, should the village board consider it? Would that be your recommendation? And two, is there a number? Would you recommend going all the way to $250? What are your thoughts? I think that's kind of the purpose of this discussion. So any questions on the information I shared?
Question. Do we have what's the proportion of gaming machines per, what's the average number of machines, each location has?
So the max number of machines any one location can have is 6.
Okay.
Except for the truck stop. And the truck stop can have 10 each. So the truck stop locations have more machines than our local business partners, and they range, but the max they can have is 6 per ordinance right now. I don't know an average number.
Not per ordinance, per statute.
Per statute, sorry, but I don't know that we have an average per location.
Well, when you're looking at this, actually.
No, it's just at 68 total.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 6 locations that have 6 machines, and we have 4 locations that have 8 machines.
Yep.
And all of those would be out at the truck stop.
Yeah, and so it's a maximum of 8 at the truck stops, not 10.
Sorry, 8. So yeah, so everyone who has them has maxed them out, it sounds like.
Because they make.
Right, because they make lots of money.
Everyone is telling me the exact same thing. They make fistful of dollars.
So, Rose Garden, for 2 weeks. I don't even know why.
Are 6 larger businesses? Are they like chains, like the truck stops? Are they?
Yeah, the 8s are all truck stop locations, because that's the only place that you can have 8.
I can read them: Rosati's, Jimmy's, Red Ox, Copper Barrel, Rose Garden, DeKalb, and then the 4 truck stops. So I wouldn't call them large businesses, but this is a significant, first of all, we get about 106,000 from all of these. Our 5%, I think they get 25% of the cut of the profit, and then the state and the county get all the rest. So these businesses are getting very good revenue from this.
Yes. Is this are we able to make gradual increments of increases?
We could do that. I think the point was, and the reason for asking all of you is, would you think of it as a competitive advantage if we could advertise, this was your point, right?
Yeah, one of the things I had said is, do we want to max to meet everybody else, or does it make Hampshire a competitive advantage for a business to come to if our registration fees, we can advertise, not necessarily just gaming, but that we build this consistent competitive advantage of our fees aren't as high as other municipalities. And one of the examples I had given was the growth here versus Pingree, and now there's been other issues because of it. The growth in Hampshire versus Pingree in residential, and that came out with the latest census numbers with how much they have grown because they had no impact fees. So it was cheaper to build houses there, it's cheaper to develop there, and they outgrew us by thousands of residents.
And now they're growing.
Well, that's why I said there's other issues because of all of that.
They're close.
We can still increase the registration fee and still be competitive.
Absolutely. But that was just a topic like for discussion. Is that, I mean, we're talking 250. Is that even something to worry about? Is it? So it's really to bring that to the
Yeah,
board.
and by the way, we're not going to affect until January of 23 because we've already collected the fee for this year.
Right.
How much would that cut into the profit of what they make off the machines?
It'd be an extra 200 or an extra $225 a year
Per machine.
per machine. So a max of 12. If they have 6 machines, what is that? 225. So that'd be 1,300.
What is the profit from those machines so great that that's just a drop in the bucket, or is that going to eat into their profit from the machines?
No. You think about it, the village is making 100,000 a year on 5%.
Yep.
These guys making $500,000. 600,000 is $1.50, whatever. The answer to that question is no. Raise it.
Yeah, my vote as well is it doesn't. Yeah, you're talking a fraction of a percent.
Could I just interject one small thing? That and you didn't say yes, so I'm just gonna keep going. Those machines did keep those restaurants afloat during COVID, though. And many of them are still suffering because of the back years of COVID and loss of business, extreme loss of business. So I just want to throw that out there too, that, you know, I just want to throw that out there on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. That's something to really think about.
So I'll add my 2 cents on it. So I did the exact same math that Ian did. So they're making, it's basically each machine generates roughly $32,000 per machine. Math comes out if you use the 5% number. We have businesses opening solely for the sake of putting machines in. I've had that conversation many times. We are also broke. I don't know if anyone's paid attention to our budgets. $15,000, and so often we make decisions for other people, and we forget because we prioritize the businesses, and we forget that we are representatives of the people who live here. They're the ones that fund our government. They're the ones that pay for everything. And they have needs and desires as well that need to be met. And I think, personally, I don't have a problem with gambling. I've always said it's the theft of the uneducated. Personally, specifically those machines, they're designed to extract money from the people who play them. I'm not a huge fan of them in the first place, but, you know, and I love our businesses. That's one of our main focuses, but I also love the people that we represent. And those people have had to be told no over and over and over again on things that they want because we're in budget constraints. But every time we have a developer that comes in front of us, we want to give away tax money. Every time we have a new business that comes in, we want to give away new tax money. For some reason, we empathize with the business owner, forgetting that we also represent the citizens that live here. And that would be my only argument. It was my argument I used to make on the board all the time is, yes, it is important to promote businesses, but we cannot promote them at the expense of the people who live here. And the amount of money that is being made on those machines is extraordinary. I've heard that time and time again. There's no no problem with that because private business is designed to make profit. That's what they're here for. However, this is tax dollars we're talking about, and I think that it should be the function of any local government to, under any reasonable means, that is allowable under the law, because there's a lot of people lobbying for those numbers down in Springfield against, for, blah, blah, blah. My advice is the people who get screwed the most in Hampshire are the people who live here because, we don't collect as much because we empathize with the third party because that party is not present. So I speak on behalf of the people, and I think we should increase the revenue so that we can deliver results to the people. So that's my opinion.
Even though it's not a lot of money, it is a 12% increase in revenue.
Yeah.
Overall gaming.
We just talked about 36,000
Yeah.
being a big deal. Now 15,000 is a big deal. We fund our facade program, which is radically transforming the downtown, with 70,000 a year. I mean, think about 15 is, right? You had that, you had a couple here, a couple here. We're scraping money together to try to deliver results to the people this time. So that's my opinion. But do we want to have a vote so you can take it back? I mean, I'm open to leaving a vote. I mean, I don't want to, it's not my view.
I think we have a pretty good consensus. I haven't heard
I
anybody.
haven't heard anybody against it.
I just didn't want my voice.
Well, except Jeannie had given her opinion on it.
Which I respect that.
On the chamber's opinion.
And we respect that
Appreciate that.
too, Gene. It's no disrespect. Obviously, we do need to be considerate of our business.
That's fine, and I understand where you're coming from 100%. But I'm just telling you, like, to share of conversations that I've had over the last 2 years and what they've been dealing with. And I mean, I totally get what you're saying, Ryan. I just wanted to bring it up forward so you have something to consider there.
Yeah.
Well, that's an example.
So that they can just get your drink and go to a gaming machine and drink with a straw. So that did.
So I would like to speak up here if I could. I was in agreement with Karen and to think that if we did it incrementally, so like if we went to 150 next year and then 250 the following year, just because it's still COVID, that would be my only thing.
I'm not opposed.
But I definitely raise it.
Yeah. I mean, the board, prior to my time, but the board did something similar with the places for eating tax. They said 1%.
Twice instead of once.
I was gonna say, isn't that, my argument at the time originally was it's ripping the Band-Aid off twice, but that's fine. I mean, I'm not opposed to it,
No,
but.
I'm just saying that.
No, I get what you're saying. No,
Ritual has
Yes,
happened.
yes. No, and it
It
is.
is impressive.
I'm not opposed to that idea, but I do think we take it in the shorts twice. Instead of once.
That's a good point, Ryan. Actually, I hate gambling. I think that it's a very addictive issue, and it's a mental health issue. And I think it preys on people, especially in times of economic hardship and sadness and isolation. And I think it's an awful, awful thing, and I wish it went away. Having said that, from a business perspective, you have to look at it both ways. That was where I was coming from thinking we sort of find a compromise and, meet somewhere in the middle. I would not be opposed to upping it to the full 250. But I think it should be raised at somewhere. So.
Well, if this feedback, I'll absolutely take that back to the board.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate you bringing this. Appreciate you getting our opinion on it. We do.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I agree.
Okay, so just quickly to go to the beautification committee update, I just want to kind of read the information that Bill Swalwell gave to me. He said the old, Bill, you haven't snuck on, have you? We don't get to see everyone.
No,
You guys see him?
he is not.
Okay, all right, so I do want to mention publicly again, what an amazing job Bill Swalwell does. I don't want that to ever get lost. I'm so appreciative of the work that he does, specifically with the beautification committee and his personal investment in interacting with all of these people. And he is, without a doubt, critically important to the beautification committee. That being said, here's his report. The old dollar store, the Edmondson family, exterior facade repair of siding and paint are complete. New temporary commercial door was added, which is temporary, and the permanent replacement door is on order. Installation pens delivery of the new commercial door. Aside from the door, repairs are complete. So another success story. Obviously, we're hoping the new owners take it even further, of course, but we got it out of this condition we did. So I'm glad, kudos to the entire group for that, and to Jay for putting pressure and everything.
And there's a potential buyer for the northern 1/3.
Right, so yeah. And did you guys all hear that there's a potential buyer for the dollar store on the northern third of that building? Nothing finalized yet, but someone's seriously looking into it.
Great.
Number two, the old doctor's office. We had approved a facade grant for Kelly and Jeff Safi. believe that. I apologize.
They're the contractor, the owner is the turf company.
Yes, excuse me. That's correct. They had finished that's correct. I think that's Ambrose Seiler, actually, was the one in it. Okay, Old Wood,
And by the way, that construction is underway. You can see it going on right now.
Yep, exactly. So, old wood siding, wooden awning, and fired clay veneer were removed approximately 4 to 6 weeks ago. New windows and doors were installed previously on the front elevation. Masonry facade replacement was begun Wednesday morning and where lower stone veneer was started. Warmer weather has allowed the masonry to begin without shelter and temporary heat. The balance of the upper brick veneer is planned for this week and possibly into next week, weather permitting. So that project is making significant progress. Again, another big success story in the core area of our focus. And then the third update, the rental property next to the Bassett Hound and Rescue. This is Jeff and Kelly Zoppi. Jeff states the new windows were scheduled to arrive this week or next and will be installed by crews shortly thereafter. The same masonry subcontractor from doctor's office is to inspect and possibly perform a limited brickwork on the front and right elevations. Siding will follow after windows and masonry is completed. Plan is still for the building to be used as a speculative commercial rental property. Jeff has indicated he may occupy a portion of the building as a business offer for his construction services. Respectfully, Bill Swallow. So thank you for that. Bill, does anyone have any questions on those that I cannot answer? Just kidding. So thank you again, Bill, if you decided to listen to this. We do appreciate your work. Okay. Just a real quick update on the Hampshire's very own, Jeannie. Again, I want to say a huge shout out to Jeannie. I know I say this every time, but I want to remind all of us that Jeannie does all of this 100% pro bono, mainly because we're poor as a village, but she does amazing work. It's incredible. I'm so grateful that she has hung in there for almost 5 years now. She's been doing this. And the next ones that are coming up, we have our Christina Michelle Salon, O'Reilly Family Dental, Chicken Dip, RK Services, and Kruger Accounting.
Hey, Ryan, we originally had Roy's Place to be next in line. Was that ever written, Jeannie?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's done. It was sent. I'm not sure what happened to it though, Ryan. I think I sent it to you like right before Christmas, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure where that one went, but that one was ready to pop.
Yeah, no, she did. It was, as always, it was great. And I sent that on.
I got stuck with a social media poster.
Unless I screwed that up, because she did send it, because I read it and it was good. It was right before Christmas. It should be our January. Okay, let me, Dave, thank you for bringing that up. I thought that I had pushed it out. I'm looking at my emails here.
I think you may have, Ryan. I think I remember seeing it.
Yeah, because you had me include, and she's gonna drop, like Heather Fodor was involved in that one, I
Yeah,
thought.
it was the PR committee.
So I will look into that, Dave, but it
Okay.
has been completed. I thought it was pushed out, but it will, if it has not been sent out, it will be sent out this week, so.
Hey, Jeannie, quick question for you. Did you ever do a write-up prior to their original closing on Iron Walk?
I don't think I've done one on Iron Walk.
So that may be somebody to add now that they've reopened.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go ahead and add them.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Aaron. Good point. That's exciting, actually.
They've got huge reviews and raves on social, and it's been packed every night, so that's great for that business.
Yeah, I love Mama Tombs, but I know people are disappointed, you know, and it's disappointing what happened to them with the health issue, but it's good to see Iron Walk come back. Big thing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Jay, do you have anything to update the group with?
I don't think so.
Fantastic. Does anyone have anything else to offer?
Is there any new businesses or nothing?
No, I think, well, I'll just mention briefly that the potential user for the north third of the dollar store would be an office in the front and a small restaurant in the back, office in the back, small restaurant in the front. And he does have a restaurant in mind, pizza place. And he would be a buyer, not a lease. I brought you up to date on Yukon. We have several moving and I should say several logistics / trucking companies that have inquired. So we probably have 4 or 5 that we're working with right now with brokers and and the companies directly. We have one large industrial project that I plan to brief the village board on soon, and I hope that they'll be making a presentation to the village board, an informal presentation, probably the first week in February. This would be about a $75 million investment, 45 acres near the tollway. And it'd be a really interesting project that will be, let's just say, a new technology that will be extremely environmentally friendly. That's about all I can go into right now.
Great.
Where near the tollway? Just out of curiosity.
North of 20. As I said,
I did send it, November 20th. Okay, all right, fantastic. Okay, guys, always, I think the world of all of you guys and the contributions that we make to this committee. I think we do really good work here, and I appreciate your patience and hanging in for as long as you do. I know these meetings are long, but I think our track record proves that they're worth the time. So if no one else has anything to add, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I second.
Any
Hey,
questions,
Jeff.
comments? I was like, they want to stay. That's awesome. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of adjourning, please vote aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Motion adjourned. Thank you, guys. Have a great week and go Bulls.
good night.
All right. Good night. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, I sent that in November.
Jay, do you need to,
Yeah.
23rd, that Rose.
Jay, do you need to hang up on the thing?
Yes, I did.
Gee, it's not too late.